So a fairly common issue that many DIYers will come across at some point or another are sunken electrical outlets. And a sunken electrical outlet is where the receptacle sits too far back from the wall surface, and not only does it not look professional, but it can also violate electrical codes and create safety hazards. So in this video, I'm going to show you how this issue looks. I'm also going to show you how to easily and quickly fix a sunken electrical outlet, and then also along the way, I will also be pointing out some very common mistakes that are made when making this essential and easy repair. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Alrighty, so as you can see here, we have a classic example of a sunken outlet. Now, these can be to varying degrees. A lot of times you can't tell that they actually have the same issue because they might be a little bit more flush. But then when you go to plug something in, the outlet then sinks in. It completely depends on the installer when they put the hole in the wall and how they installed it as to how bad this is actually going to look. But like always, anytime we're making any kind of an electrical repair or install, the first thing we always want to do is make sure that we turn off the circuit breaker that is supplying the power to the circuit we're going to work on. All right, now that I've got that circuit breaker off with the cover plate still on, I can take my outlet tester, plug it in, and make sure I don't get any lights coming on, which I do not, so I know that the power is in fact off. And now that the power is off, now I can remove my cover plate to the receptacle. All right, so as you can see here, this is almost always going to be the case for when you have a sunken receptacle. Generally speaking, what happens is the person that cuts the holes in the drywall or whatever surface you're using for your wall, maybe it's a wall panel, you got tile, maybe you added tile to a kitchen, whatever it is, the hole for the receptacle is too large. So the yokes, that's what these metal straps are on the top and the bottom of the outlet or receptacle, they should be touching the face of whatever your wall is. That is what holds it out and flush with the wall so you get that nice finished look. But regardless of how it was done, I'm going to show you a few different ways in order to very easily and very inexpensively fix this. And one of the ways I'm going to show you is one that not very many people have talked about, but it's actually a pretty ingenious invention to take care of this problem. But first thing we want to do, again, we've already verified the power is off. Once that's done, all we need to do is remove the screws on the top and the bottom of the receptacle and pull this receptacle out and away from the box. Per code and for very important safety reasons, a thing that you want to really keep in mind and make sure of is that the gap between the front of the box and your wall is not more than 1/4 of an inch. If it's at 1/4 inch or less, your repair in most cases is going to be a lot easier. And I don't know if you can see that or not, but I'm pretty much right at that 1/4 inch gap, and that would be my limit for the steps that I would have to take. Now, for those of you that are going to have a larger gap than that, which is going to be probably many of you, I'm not going to leave you hanging here. I'm not going to skip over what you would need to do. But the other thing you need to pay attention to is what is your wall made of? And that's why there are these rules. If you've got a wall that's a combustible material, say it's wood paneling, the reason why the gap matters is because if these receptacles are too far out and away from the box and they're not being covered over where the terminal screws are, if you were to get any kind of arcing, then there's a possibility that it could actually ignite that combustible wall material and then start a fire. So if you have over 1/4 of an inch and or you have combustible wall material, that's when you're going to want to use some sort of a box extender. The reason for that is obviously, since it's called a box extender, it is extending the box. It is going to be protecting those sides so that if there's any kind of arcing that comes from the receptacle, it's still going to be contained inside of an enclosed box. So these are probably one of the most common types of box extenders. However, there are some other options out there, and in my opinion, I personally think that these are better, or I like to use these better, I should say. And these can really come in handy if the specific size or gap that's there, that these fit it almost perfectly. So this particular one, this one's yellow, color doesn't really mean anything, but this yellow one is a 1/4 inch box extender, and this black one is a 1/2 inch box extender. So in my case, what I would need to do is take my 1/4 inch box extension, put it over my receptacle like I did with the other one, put that box extender in the wall, and then I could go and tighten this down. And then everything would be flush or very close to it. I would have to make some very minor adjustments, possibly with some shims. Same thing with a 1/2 inch, you just put it over the receptacle, push the box extender up against the face of the box on the wall, and then you can then tighten it down. Now in my case, the 1/2 inch is a little bit too large, so it's protruding out away from the wall. So for me, that wouldn't look good either, but it just depends on your particular situation. And just something to note, if you're using a box extender, the first one I showed you came with longer screws. But if you're using one of these, a lot of times they do not come with longer screws. So you're gonna wanna buy a bag of these longer screws like this one right here. And like always, for your convenience, I'm gonna have links for everything you see in this video, from the box extenders to the shims, these screws, to all the tools that I use. Everything you see in this video, I'm gonna have links for all of it down in the description down below, that at any time you can just click on them and it'll take you directly to whatever it is you're wanting to check out. All right, so I've shown you a couple of different options for the box extensions. And again, you will have to use them if your gap is over 1/4 of an inch. What I'm about to introduce to you now are a few different ways of then leveling everything, regardless of whether you have a box extension or you don't need one. So starting with one of the first ways and one of the most common ways that people know of in order to then bring these receptacles level, whether you're using a box extender or you don't have to, are these types of shims right here. Now, the way that these work are you can tear these off to where, depending on how thick you need it to be, you can just bend it over like so and push it in like that, and then it's together. And then you can just dry fit them by then taking that gap right there, putting it on that screw, and then you push it in up against the box to figure out how much of a gap that you need to make up for and how many times you need to fold these over. So for me in my gap, I think I'm gonna need to do it one more time. So I did 2 folds. I've got 3 total pieces here. At that point, I can then rip those away from the rest of them. And I'm gonna need it for the bottom as well. So I just need to fold them over just like I did for the top ones and then rip them away. Then again, I just take this groove, put it over the screw, and then same thing at the bottom. Push it into the box, and then I can tighten down my screws. Once you've verified that the receptacle is straight, it's nice and flush with where it was supposed to be with the wall, then I could just take my cover again and then tighten down that cover screw. Just like that, everything is nice and flush. The receptacle looks exactly the way that it should have, and nobody is the wiser as to how this was done. All right, so this next one I'm gonna show you, in my opinion, is probably the fastest way of doing it. Not always the best way of doing it, but if it will work for your situation, it doesn't really get any easier than this. All right, so it would just have to be like that, loosened away from the box and out away from the wall. And the material, in this case, I can use that makes it so quick is this right here. These are made by Rayco. Of course, there are other knockoffs, but Rayco is the name brand a lot of electricians use. And this is called a flush fit. The way that this works, this won't take very long at all. We take a look at our metal piece here. Up here in the top right corner, it says up. So you know that this is the top of it. Then all we need to do is we need to take this groove right here, slide it in behind this metal strap or yoke here, and then on top of the screw that is going through the yoke. So just like that, we still got it at an angle and it's almost like it's on a hinge. All we have to do then is take the bottom portion and hinge it or slide it up underneath of the bottom portion down here at the bottom. And then at this point, in many cases, but I'll show you here in a moment why I would not use it for this one, in many cases, this is done. You can go ahead, start tightening up the screws, put the cover plate on, and everything will be flush. Now, I could make this work for this receptacle, but I don't know if any of you can tell, but I don't have a lot of overlap up here at the top between the metal and the face of my wall. Down here at the bottom, this actually started to go in. So this one also can have some limitations to it. But if it is one where it can fit in there and maybe you just have damage from the ears, but you still have plenty of wall space here, you saw it's not going to get any quicker or easier than using this right here. So this is another option, but again, it just depends on your particular situation. All right, so I've now shown you a few different shim methods. This next one though is one I just think is Ingenious. You don't need to worry about how wide the hole is because it will have no effect on it whatsoever. And it's one that I've seen very few people actually talk about. And that comes down to this little sprocket looking material, and this is called a Unishim. Now, I am not sponsored by anybody in this video, including Unishim. They did reach out to me. They made me aware of this, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago, and I've just been having these sit in the garage. But I have to say, these things really are ingenious with how they work and how they can work in almost any application. And they're just as simple as this one piece right here. So let me just quickly show you how these are used, how they work, and why they can work in so many different situations. But what makes these things so special is this little nodule up here that you see in the side of this Unishim. It just sticks out ever so slightly out and away from the metal. And that is where their patent really comes in. So all you gotta do with the Unishim is you wanna make sure that little nodule or circle is facing towards you or towards the receptacle yoke. And then we just wanna go ahead, put it on the screw, and we're gonna have to put it on the bottom and the top screws. And then we're just gonna start feeding that on there. And we wanna get it tightened on here to where it's about 1/4 of an inch, that there's a 1/4 inch gap between the Unishim and then this metal strap on the receptacle or the yoke. And of course, you're gonna have to adjust this depending on what your gap is like. And then, like I said, I'm gonna take a second one and put it on the bottom one, and I'm gonna do the exact same thing. All right, so as you can see, I've got my Unishim on the top and bottom screws, which I did elect to go with longer screws, as the ones that usually come with it in many cases are just gonna be too short. So now what I wanna do is I wanna take my screws and I wanna insert them into the holes of the box and start tightening them down. All right, so here's the key though. We don't wanna tighten it down all the way into the box. That's not how this works. So I'm really focusing on this top one right now. If you can see that Unishim is right in behind the yoke right there, we want to get that Unishim, the face of it, flush with the front of our wall face. So in my case, I've pretty much got it right about there. This is where now that little nodule I talked about earlier, that's where this comes into play. We want to then take our receptacle and push it up against the Unishim. What this is going to do is, as we go to tighten this down, that little nodule is gonna fit in the hole around our screw right here, in this gap right here, and it's gonna get caught. When it gets caught there, it's no longer gonna twist and keep going deeper into the box. It's gonna stay right there and then tighten it down to the Unishim like a vise. So I'll go ahead and start doing that, twisting it to the right. Eventually, it's gonna get stuck in that hole there, which it already is. So I'm just gonna go ahead, finish tightening that down. So now my top one's done. Now I just have to do the same thing with the bottom one. So as you can see there, right above my pointer finger, that little nodule sticking through the hole there next to the screw, that's where it gets caught at. And then when I go to continue rotating the screw, why it can't continue to rotate and tighten down deeper, and why the screw is then gonna sandwich up against it and tighten it down. So I'll go ahead, start tightening this down. And that's pretty close to perfect. My top one is perfect. My bottom one is still a little bit sticking out down here at the bottom. I have a tiny little gap here, but that's not a problem at all. All I need to do is keep pressure on my receptacle up against the Unishim. I'm gonna go ahead, loosen my screw just slightly. And what I need to do is I actually need to make my gap just slightly larger so that the Unishim is just a little bit more below the front surface of my wall face. So I'll just go ahead and do that really quickly. These minor adjustments are super easy to make. And at this point, I can actually dry fit it and see how close I'm gonna be. So right about there is perfect. So I can go ahead now and continue tightening my screw down and pulling it down into the box. All right, so now this is perfect. This is perfectly flush with the wall face like it should have been if this wasn't overcut on the top and the bottom. It's in there nice and tight. I can't push on that receptacle to where it sinks in. I can't pull out away from it either. That Unishim has completely sandwiched it between the Unishim and the screw head. And so now at this point, all that there is left to do is take my faceplate again, put it over my receptacle, and tighten down the faceplate screw to the receptacle. But as you can see now, there is no gap whatsoever between my cover plate and my wall wall face. My receptacle is just barely sticking out of my cover plate like it should be. It's not sunken anymore like I showed you in the very beginning. And again, this looks exactly how it should have been installed in the first place. Nobody's gonna ever be able to tell that at one time this was a sunken outlet. If we push on it, it's not going anywhere. So if we're putting in cords, it's not sinking either. So those Unishims, I'm gonna have those in my electrical box at all times. They barely take up any space at all. This is one of the containers they come in, and this one has 50 in it. But that being said, for your convenience, I will have links for everything you saw in this video, from the Unishims to all the other shims, the box extenders, all the tools and materials I used. I'll have links for everything down in the video's description down below. So when you click on those links, it will take you directly to whatever you clicked on, so you can check out all of this for yourself. Now, really quickly, if you found value in this video, then you will definitely want to check out some other videos that I've done in the past where I talk about some of the biggest mistakes that DIYers unknowingly make when installing light switches or receptacles. In those videos, I show you what those mistakes are, and then I also show you what the correct way is, or better practices, to ensure that they are safe and also last for a very long time. So I will post links to both of those right over here. Whichever one interests you the most, all you have to do is click on it and it will take you directly to it. But I hope that you found value in this video, and if you did, if you could do me a huge favor, hit that thumbs up button right down below. And of course, if you have any questions or comments still, you can leave those down in the comment section. And I'll catch you all in the next one.